Here we are, another video with Scruffy Tales, and today we will return to the topic of the Gripen Fighter Jet. And there has been some interesting developments, so much so that I can't help but to speculate what it all could mean. So it's been announced that Ukrainian pilots will visit Sweden to get to train on the Gripen, or testing it more or less, in simulators and to get some airtime in the double-seated training version. Probably to get a feel on how it handles and experience short takeoff and landing and start on roads and whatnot. Probably also to take a look at the turnaround capabilities and ground crew requirements. Let's remind ourselves that Gripen can refuel and rearm in 10 minutes out on a road cutting through a forest, with the help of one technician and 5 conscripted crew members, relying on 2 trucks to bring everything they need. And most of the work requires only a single custom-made tool for the job. Just to compare with an F-16, that needs 20 people, specialists at that, to rearm and refuel it, and its air intake makes it vulnerable to foreign objects on the ground, so it cannot land on roads and random airfields during wartime conditions. You tell me which aircraft you think might work better in a war-torn Ukraine. Anyway, obviously it makes you wonder why Ukrainian pilots are taking a look at Gripen. Is it a sales pitch from Saab and Sweden? Is the plan to convince Ukraine to purchase Gripen fighters? Or is it to see how easy it is for Ukraine to learn how to fly it, in case they get their hands on some Gripen and can use them in the war? Maybe it's both. Whatever the case, Sweden has been very clear about that the Swedish Air Force needs all the Gripen they are flying. Sweden cannot lend or sell any fighters at this time to Ukraine, which seems to suggest that Ukrainian pilots are visiting Sweden to get a feel for the aircraft, so batches might be purchased at a later date. However, Sweden is not the only air force in Europe operating Gripen. The Czech Republic flies 14, of which 12 are combat aircraft, as does Hungary. But the Czechs have recently put in an order for 24 F-35s, intending to end the lease for their Gripens by 2027. This opens up very exciting options, if you ask me, or at least the possibility for options. So I'm gonna stick my chin out and offer a completely unsubstantiated theory. The Czechs will hand over their Gripen to Ukraine. Sweden will train the Ukrainians, and the Czechs will provide the hardware. And maybe, at the end of summer, we will see the Ukrainian Air Force fly 12 Gripen on combat missions. So what are the Czechs flying? They have the JAS-39 Gripen C, as in Charlie, as their combat aircraft. Turnaround in 10 minutes, minimal ground crew requirements, and with 8 hardpoints, and also fully NATO compatible. It only needs a runway of 800 meters in length and 16 meters wide, and can use ordinary roads with no problem. And not only that, but the Czechs have continuously received updates from Sweden and Saab, making sure their Gripen are up to date and as advanced as they can be. This is a highly advanced fighter and fully capable of engaging Russian aircraft and come out victorious. Will it carry the state-of-the-art Meteor missile? Not in any weapons package that the Czechs will send. But a number of countries use meteors, like Sweden, Spain, the UK, France and Germany. If Ukraine gets fighters that can be made to launch meteors, then maybe we will see these countries supplying meteors to Ukraine. I personally don't think it's that very likely. But hey, I also thought it was unlikely that Ukraine would be getting Western fighters. And here we are with the US saying Ukraine can get F-16s and Ukrainian pilots testing Gripen. So what do I know? It's almost as if I'm a random YouTuber that doesn't really know shit about anything. I do think it's not unlikely that Ukraine might get Gripen from the Czechs. It's not as likely that Hungary will release theirs, as that would require a pretty sweet deal from the West. And I doubt the West is interested in any such deals, considering that Hungary is suspiciously friendly with Russia. So in the end, I think the best bet is that the Czechs will hand over Gripens to Ukraine if Ukrainian pilots get trained on them. And I suspect the Ukrainians will test the fighter in Sweden, return to report what they thought of it and how its capabilities might benefit Ukraine. If they decide they want it, then they will try and get the Czechs to release theirs, and the pilots and ground crew will go to Sweden and train. Seems logical to me. Will it happen? We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But it seems there is a mutual consensus that the Gripen is the perfect fit for Ukraine. It is the fighter they need more than any other, because it was built specifically to fight the kind of war Ukraine has found itself in, with few proper airfields, required to use aircraft from makeshift runways, the need to rely on as few ground crew as possible, and being able to quickly land, rearm and get back in the fight as soon as possible. On top of that, Gripen can launch close to all modern and advanced missiles in use by NATO. I will link my first video about the Gripen below, as well as my video about the basics of BVR combat, relying on missiles for beyond visual range engagements. So if that tickles your fancy, I suggest you have a look at those as well. Gripen has a couple of advantages over Russian fighters. Good missiles and a good radar are obviously essential in modern air combat, and the Gripen checks both of those boxes. Another thing that the Gripen has that is an advantage is its small size. Being small means it can quickly turn in a dangerous situation. So why is that important? First off, as soon as your missile guides itself, you can veer off and leave the danger zone. The quicker you can turn around, the quicker you can leave. It also means you can more quickly turn to face potential threats. Which leads us to dogfights. Perhaps not what people think about in a modern context of air-to-air combat, but it is still part of air combat, and Swedish pilots still train for it, for instance. Being able to turn quickly to launch a missile or use your autocannon is vital for dogfights, and the small Gripen can turn very quickly in these situations. Turning quickly is also, perhaps a bit surprising, important in combat over long ranges. If an enemy missile locks onto your aircraft with radar, you drop chaff as you turn away from the incoming missile. Chaff is clouds of metal strips that blocks radar, and you hide in the shadow created by the chaff. With chaff deployed, you then fly away from the incoming missile, hopefully staying in the shadow of the chaff so the missile cannot find you. If it finds you and keeps going after you, say you have run out of chaff, you have only a few options to rely on. One option is to fly low and try and use the terrain to hide you from the radar. Flying low also means you fly through thicker atmosphere. The air is more dense, in other words, which means the incoming missile will be slowed down and will spend more fuel trying to catch up. And this leads us on to how you try and avoid an incoming missile in general, and why turning quickly is so important to avoid getting hit by a missile. You try and outrun it. The aircraft has more fuel than any missile, even if the missile is incredibly fast. So your best bet in this modern age is to turn around as quickly as possible once a missile is locked on, and increase distance to the enemy aircraft and outrun the missile trying to catch up with you. Once the missile runs out of fuel, it will begin to lose altitude and ability to maneuver. So, the Gripen is small and able to turn around really fast, giving it the ability to quickly begin to outrun an incoming missile. This ability also gives it an edge at medium distance when relying on heat-seeking missiles, where it can quickly turn to launch its missiles, and it can quickly turn to try and avoid getting hit. And when we get to proper old-school dogfights, the ability to quickly turn and outmaneuver the enemy is the difference between life and death in the skies. Having a smaller plane offers a few downsides also, obviously. You can't carry as much fuel and you can't carry as many missiles and bombs. But the Gripen is designed to defend Sweden. That means only flying in and around Swedish territory and not doing long-range strikes into neighboring countries. And with only requiring 10 minutes to rearm and refuel before being back in the fight, that does to an extent help out with carrying fewer missiles and bombs, since you can quickly get new ones once you have launched all your weapons. A small relief, I'm sure, if you're in the skies, getting shot at and have no more missiles to fire back with. But overall, it is helpful. Gripen is also obviously famous for its electronic warfare systems, specifically designed to counter Russian equipment, radars and tracking hardware, making it difficult to spot, locate and lock onto the Gripen, especially if you are the Russian armed forces. Will Ukraine get Gripen? Well, they are getting a chance to test it and see its capabilities firsthand. Why that is anyone's guess. But who knows, maybe we will see Gripens flying over Ukraine sooner than we think. Until then, gå på marsch, Ukraine!